Muted. Hello, everyone. Author DL Tillery here, the Mistress of Horror, and welcome to the AWC's 2025 conference. And this is the Anatomy of Fear, a horror panel of indie authors. We're going to have a good discussion today, and I'm popping in a few minutes early just to make sure we get underway and there's no technical difficulties. I had some of those earlier, so please bear with me if that happens, because it may or may not pop me out, but I will be back if it does. But I'm hoping everything was righted. Apparently, we had storms in the area that was interfering with the internet, but I think we should be okay now. So this is the Anatomy of Fear, and on the panel, it's going to be myself, Adalia D. Winters, and Regina St. Clair of the Haunted Library, and we're going to be talking about being horror indie authors in the industry as we see it and the things that we have experienced ourselves, and talk about that a little bit. This is going to be a 54-minute run panel discussion. If you do have any questions about anything horror based that you would like to ask, always put a Q in front of the question for me, and I will have a couple minutes Q&A at the end of this panel. And if you notice in the chat, I shared 2 links that you could download for your own, time and things. You get a free copy of my short horror story, La Draga, which is a strong short horror. And then I have a free mini guide as well, how to outline a short horror story. This is a very mini guide. I did do a workshop one time on that. If you always want to go back on my channel and check that out. But yes, and the short horror La Draga, usually this particular one, if you download, you join my newsletter to get the monthly newsletter that is put out on the 4th Monday of the month. So please feel free to download either one of those, and that'd be good. Check the description section of this video so that way you can get the playlist of who is coming up next. We have the Saturday after party after this. And of course, there are other panels and workshops and presentations that will be happening. So do check the schedule for those coming up. And be sure to fill out the form at the end of this, so that way you can be entered into the giveaways that are going on all day. Try to remember to do that, so who doesn't want to win stuff? And I did want to thank SD Houston and Kaufman and Devin for all their hard work and all the volunteers today, because they've been putting the time in. So let's go ahead and start this right up so that way we have enough time for a few questions at the end if you end up having any. This is a very relaxed discussion. So again, if you have any horror-based questions, please feel free to ask them, and I will make sure I get them at the end. I'm going to mute out and turn my camera off so you can get the full effect of the panel. See you on the flip side. Hello, everyone. Author DL Tillery here, the Mistress of Horror. Welcome to the Anatomy of Fear, a horror panel with indie authors at this year's AWC Authortube Writing Conference 2025. And thank you for joining us for this panel of horror writers. We actually have just the 3 of us on the panel for this panel. We, unfortunately, 2 of our panelists weren't able to make it, but it's still going to be a great creepy treat with us here. So I'm going to introduce my panelists here, that ones going to be talking with us about all the creepy things today. So you can learn about horror genre, horror industry through these indie authors. Let's introduce first Dahlia D. Winters. Hello, Dahlia.
Hello.
Won't you introduce yourself to our audience here and let them know who you are and what you do?
Well, my name is Dahlia De Winters. That's my pen name. I've been publishing since about 2011. I publish romance, and in the last couple of years, I've gotten into publishing horror stories. And that's basically about it.
Ooh. And our next panelist is... the lovely Regina St. Clair at the Haunted Library. So, Regina, please introduce yourself and let them know what you're all about.
Okay, I'm Regina St. Clair, and I write horror. I've self-published about 20 books in all at this point, dark poetry, and also YA paranormal romance. So that's kind of my specialty. I also edit a zine, a horror zine called Bookworms that comes out around, I don't know, 3 times a year. And I've also edited the Authortube anthologies. So I've done a lot of that kind of stuff, as well as my YouTube channel.
Awesome, awesome. And I will contest that both of these ladies are amazing. I've had the pleasure to work with them in different aspects of the Authortube community, and they do deliver. So we're going to be talking about all different aspects of the horror community and writing. So let's just do our icebreaker question to you ladies. What made you fall in love with the horror genre? And I'll let you take the floor first, Regina, on that one.
Well, probably just, I think I started out just as a lover of horror movies, because I do remember when I was 5 years old seeing an old black and white 1950s movie on the television called Tarantula. Do you know that movie where they blow up the giant tarantula? And I think that was like love at first sight. I was scared, but kind of liked that feeling of being scared. And I think it just kind of grew from there. I always loved more of the more of the like occult kind of horror, I think. Then I kind of grew out of the monsters and stuff, but I just have always loved it, and I don't know. It's I'm not really sure why.
It called to you. That's what I'm going to go with. All right, Dahlia, what about you?
Well, I grew up a 70s child, and in the New York metro area, they had a program on called the 4:30 movie. So every day they would have a different movie on. Sometimes I guess they had drama movies or whatever, but the ones that I most remember were Monster and Vampire and Horror Week. So I got to watch a lot of Vincent Price movies, a lot of Christopher Lee movies, along with the Godzilla stuff, Frankenstein, The Mummy, Blackula. These are all movies that I watch. It's very thrilling, not great time. And then when you go to bed, you always have to check your closet and under the bed just in case, because you never know if the mummy might be there or not. And then my first horror book I think I read was Carrie by Stephen King. And after that, it was all either downhill or uphill after that. That's how I became a lover of horror.
That's great. Actually, I think all of our stories are quite similar. I started with horror because my mother was quite into horror. It's funny as much she doesn't watch as much these days because she's like, listen, I have a room solo to myself. I'm not watching these. I'm like, oh, now you're a punk. Like, but I started watching horror quite early in life as a child. I wasn't too afraid of it, though my mom did not let me watch dolls because I had so many dolls when I was younger. So I saw that when I was like a teenager, and I was like, yeah, I can see why you probably didn't let me look at that as a child. But I was looking at other things like Freddy Krueger and Jason and all these different like horror movies and things. So I was quite fascinated with like creatures and stuff, and I always loved vampires. So, and I was a big Turner Classic movie girl when I was a teenager. So I watched all the old black and white films, anything horror. As I was definitely checking out black or white or in other languages. I just didn't care. I just wanted to soak it all up. So I think our journey started off quite similar in that way, which is funny. And I think that might have led us to where we are today, considering, So, all right. So we're going to go ahead and start with our first topic, which is the heart of indie horror. And that is exploring emotional truth, creative freedom, and the power of fear. And so the first question I'm going to toss at you ladies is, what kinds of fear do you explore most in your stories? Dahlia, I'll let you take the floor on that one first.
Usually I have a fear of anarchy, like something happens in the world that throws everything off. Everything normal is no longer normal. People are scrambling, struggling, trying to create not images of normality, but to try to restore normality, but it doesn't work. So the movies like I'm a big chicken, but I do like zombie movies. and movies like The Blob, which is kind of like a monster movie where like this
Mhm.
thing is just creeping and you never know, it might just pop up anywhere. I enjoy movies like that. And I also enjoy supernatural type movies, like ghost stories. And those are the topics that I explore in some of my writing.
I love that. I did read one of
Mhm.
your stories, like the zombie romance, the one where you have. I love that one. That one's actually really
Okay.
good.
The Loving Among the Dead.
Yes, I have.
Uh,
I bought the paperback.
that was my first one
Yeah, I
ever
really like
writing a
that one.
zombie story.
Really, really good. I really like that one a
Oh,
lot.
thank
All
you.
right. And how about you, Regina?
Uh, just give me the question once more so I
What
can.
kinds of fear do you explore
Oh, what
most
kinds of
in
fear?
your stories?
I think it's probably more like internal fears, like in that gothic sense of like the shadow self. So I get into more, I think, more psychological horror in my
Yes,
stories. Yeah, so I feel like that we all have that dark side that sometimes we're afraid of exploring,
very
and
much.
that that sort of forms the basis of my characters and that kind of
Hmm.
thing.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I can see that. I definitely read your stuff. I definitely agree with that. That's true. And I did enjoy. I love psychological horror. It's good stuff. I like all kinds of horror. So I'm like,
Me too.
I got days and days of horror. And I guess myself, if I answer the question, that I tend to like to get the perspective of the monster because I like
Mm,
monster horror. That I like writing it, and I want to. I always try to. The main character tends to be the monster in my horror, and because I want people to see the perspective of the monster, no matter how twisted it may become. So I want the monster to be the lead, and so that's in order to I think in order to for people to see the monster in themselves as well. But if it's coming from the perspective of what we as humans review as something different than us, a monster on that level, that then you maybe that'd be a different viewpoint. So I always like to see that, especially when they do movies from the monster perspective, which isn't a lot. A
Mm,
lot of times it is like the human condition in horror a lot of the time. So the monster tends to be always the bad guy, but I tend to try to write the monster from a gray area a lot of times. To them, they may not be bad, but they are bad.
right.
right. Well, yeah, I saw that in your Coliastro. Am I saying
Yeah,
that right? Like that was you switched points of view, so you got. Would he be considered a monster? Kind of.
he would be definitely to
Yeah.
like immortals. He definitely would be, and
Yeah.
most of the time, to mortals, most things are going to be considered monsters or be even fallen angels, for instance, are
Hmm.
going. If we saw their actual what they were portrayed as really looking like not our humanoid versions that we like to push a lot when they look more Cthulhian leaning
Mm.
angels really look like just like masses of flesh with eyes and
Oh
lots
wow.
of
Yeah.
wings. That's the general way it was described in like biblical stuff. They weren't
Right.
described as like more humanoid. They don't look like that.
Yeah.
They,
Okay.
humans' mind would be more. I think if you brought angelics up into a horror setting, you probably would be leaning psychological a lot
Hmm.
of the time because of human mind breaking. If they actually saw those type of things, that's supposed to be seen as good, but might not. Your mind might not view it as such. So
Mm,
I
but
do
yeah,
like the angel subgenre.
yeah, it is a nice subgenre for
Yeah.
sure. I'm interested in that. But we do have a second question for this topic that we could
Okay.
grab onto. How does indie publishing affect the way you approach horror? And Rachel, I'll let you start with that one in your opinion.
Well, what I love about indie publishing is that I actually can get my books out there, like you don't have to go through the gatekeepers. You can
mm,
do your own thing.
Yes.
And it's hard to get the eyeballs and the readers, but if you keep doing it, you eventually start to pick up some steam. So I love the freedom of indie publishing. There is a bit of a learning curve as far as like
mm.
it took me a long time to figure out how to do it. Just
Yes.
and now it's great because you have software, and like when I started out I was trying to format on Word and making all kinds of mistakes, and
Right.
so I just love that I can do it. I love the freedom, and it's interesting to read indie horror too, because and I try to read as much as I can, and buy other indie books, because that's where you really find a lot of cool stuff.
True. I agree with that. And Dahlia, how about yourself?
Well, having been published with an e-publisher several times, I find that when you publish it yourself, number one, you're not under a deadline. So if you get in the middle of the book, and let's say your book is accepted by an e-publisher, and then you get the synopsis and all that stuff, and sometimes you get in the middle of the book or in the middle of the story and realize that really wasn't how it was going to turn out. So you go ahead and change your ending. So you're not really trapped into your template of this is what the story has to be about. This has to be the beginning, the middle, and the end. I think indie publishing encourages more creativity, more freedom of stretching your story, stretching your characters, and you're more writing for yourself than really trying to chase a trend or trying to please other people. And as Regina said, it's also easier to put your product out and that actually meets your vision. And you basically have more input over your cover. You have more input over your, basically your story content. And if as extreme or as mild as you want it to be, you can do that.
Yes.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very true. I agree with that. I would say myself, I'm not sure if it affects the way I approach horror per se, but it could if I was to go into traditional, since there are, no matter which genre you're in, there may be things you're not privy to do that you otherwise would. I assume I would have to think of some of the stuff that I decide to put in my horror novels. If I was going traditional, they may not be looking for that. With, as you said, the freedom of being an indie publisher, and with horror, you can just kind of go and do what you're going to do. If you're in the mood to write, you don't have to follow a trend. You can write a slasher. If you're in the mood to write a monster horror, you're in the mood to write psychological, then you could go either way. However you want your books to end, however you want to do your characters. You don't really have those pullbacks of any gatekeeping, as Regina brought up, or any things that they're not looking for at the time. Like they're saying, well, this isn't really trending right now, so we're not looking like that. And if you being an indie author and using indie publishing for your horror, you're kind of like, okay, well, this is what I want to write about right now, so this is happening. So I think it's definitely going to come down to the freedoms, and that's probably mostly even no matter what genre you're in. But I think since horror is a very niche and it's not for everyone, because you have bigger genres out there, obviously, like romance, for instance, that have maybe open more flexibility as far as like what they may allow in it. And horror is violence a lot of the times, subjects people don't want to talk about. So that gives you the leg room to talk about whatever that horrific subject may be that somebody else may not be willing to hear. So I think that the indie aspect gives you that ability to just, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm glad the of indie publishing. Once you finish your story, if you're quick enough, you can have it up Amazon, drafted digital on your own website within 72 to 48 to 72 hours. Whereas if you're a traditional publisher, I've signed the contract in 2022 and it's coming out 2024. I mean, like the agony of waiting that long to have your product in your hands is crazy. I mean, people do it, but to me, I was just like, if I can have it up by next week, if I finish it, hey, I'm going to do that.
Yeah, that is something. And I'm glad you brought up trends, DL, because I try to read, like I'll go to the library and try to read just current fiction. Like a lot of it is more like horror romance, I think. But I noticed that a lot of them are on the same, they're very similar.
Yeah.
So I think that is cool that maybe we can, I don't know, start our own trends.
Yeah, exactly. We can. Like, I'm in the mood to do this. And they're like, well, no one's done that. And I'm like, or they're not interested in that anymore, or whatever the case is. Then you can still decide that you're going to do it. You find your audience. Exactly.
Yep. Find your audience.
That's where it starts at. So there's not going to be any like, oh, you can't.
We're not looking for that right now.
Yeah.
I am. All right. So our next topic is going to be crafting fear. And that's mastering tension, atmosphere, and subgenre fusion in the horror fiction. So the first question I'm going to throw at you is, how do you build dread in your scenes? This is more your personal writing style. So I'll let you answer that first, Regina.
Well, I think that, I mean, if you go back to like the masters of horror, like Poe, I think that what builds that tension, that atmosphere, it's kind of it really is an art. It's hard to break it down exactly what it is, but I think it's definitely in the pacing and uh, like in my last book was Final Dress. It was like a slasher film set in a theater. I try to bring in like a lot of sounds, like as someone's being pursued by a killer or something, like sounds and smells.
Yeah.
I was trying to be conscious of those things. That those are like what I really admire about Poe, like that
Yeah.
slow build. So I try to be aware of that, but I think it's hard to say when you're in the process of writing. You're just kind of making those decisions as you're going. It's kind of hard to be like, okay, this is what this is.
Very true. Very true. I get that.
But I do try.
Oh yeah, you do well. I read Final Dress.
Thank
I
you.
really enjoyed this.
Oh, thanks. I didn't know. Yeah, I guess you
Yeah.
can read that one.
Yeah, I really like that one. I'm
thank
actually
you.
working on your other ones. The Halloween one that you released. I
Oh,
have that on my
the
TBR.
short stories.
Yeah, I love when it's a collection of short stories. So that's my next one that I'm
good.
working on
Thank
now. All right, Dahlia, how about you? How do you build dread in your scenes?
I like to take the mundane, the simple things, and then you flip it. I have a very tiny story to tell. I used to go to my paternal grandmother's house for Christmas. Her house was built, I mean, it's a small house, one of those small kind of colonial homes. You walk in, you have the foyer, the living room was here, kitchen, and there was an upstairs staircase that went up at 90 degrees. You went up 3 stairs, then you went up the rest of the staircase. That's fine. You would go to the top of the stairs, and there was only one bathroom, which was upstairs. So everybody's in the living room, making noise real loud, just having a good time. And I have to go to the restroom. Oh, going upstairs. This is my dad. He grew up in the house. He's like, going upstairs. Well, let me tell you, that hallway is the scariest thing that I've ever been in.
Oh,
it had a
my.
linoleum floor, and it was red and white. I can picture it now. And there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 doors off that hallway.
Ooh.
That sounds creepy right now.
Oh my goodness. And the bathroom was the one at the very end on the right.
No.
I'm getting a picture in my head of this like tilted angle.
So imagine
Oh my goodness.
And one of the doors led to the attic.
Ooh.
Oh,
So here you
got
go.
past the attic door. No.
Yes, you do. So I was
That's
upstairs.
the setup.
Everybody's downstairs. And you would walk down that hall, and every step you took, that floor creaked.
Oh no.
And all you could think was, they're so loud, having a good time. If something happens to me up here and I don't come back down, and they even go to note, you have to walk all the way down to the end of the hall, past the attic, which was on that side. Creak, creak, creak. And bonus, the bathroom was and like an ensuite, so it had 2 doors.
No.
A clawfoot tub. So there we go. So as a kid, you're doing your business, and you got a door here and a door here. And I remember I used to try to stretch so I could press both doors closed.
I can see that.
Time. So
that's hilarious.
Is going to the bathroom. Very mundane, very simple, right? Can be very scary, depending on how it's portrayed. And as Regina said, the sound, I can hear the sounds of the floor as I walk down that hallway today. And then as the sound of them in the living room got quieter and quieter, the longer you went down that hall. So you can take something that's very simple and turn it into something that's very scary.
That's a great story.
Yes, it is. And
I can tell you're a good writer, Dahlia. I'm going to read you.
And I like to talk.
but that was a great description.
It is. So yes, I get that. I see where you go now. I see you.
Well, you remember my basement scene in Loving Among the Dead. That's another thing.
Yes. So yeah, I see where you get that from now. Like, yes, you're good with that. But yeah, I love that when I'm reading horror and it's like that build up. That's my thing. I like to creep up on you. So I build dread by I'm very layered with how I like to scare you. And I like to leave Easter eggs throughout because you may forget it, but you'll remember it when you get gotten. So that's kind of like what I like to do. And when I'm writing series, the build up is even longer because
True.
now you have multiple books to keep the layers going, So then that's even more so. And now when I do a world build around said thing, is all a connection through
Mm.
different things. So if anyone who's read Cagliostro, there's a particular scene in the book where there's this old woman in a hotel, and it's not a very long scene, and it's a very creepy scene, and
I'm only
she's
halfway through, so
yeah. So when you see the scene, you'll know it. And
oh,
it's very prominent. It's not a very long scene, and that's the only part she's in the whole book. But she will return. That's all I'm
I
saying.
do
So
remember one of your stories, DL. I read on your
mhm,
website, and this is probably years ago, like literally years ago.
I'm
It
sure.
was an open house story, and it was a free story on
Yeah.
your website. And I sat back, I said, oh, maybe I shouldn't have read that so late at night, but here we are.
Try to go to sleep now. Try to go
Oh,
to sleep now.
I just got
Yeah.
out of the bed. What's going on?
Yep. So I mean, I love that. I love the build up to it. So I do it. It's like becomes just a natural thing for me to do now because it's just my style. And I'm like and I do the same thing with like the layers of the story of the different characters. Like there's a connection. There's this thing that's going to occur that's just a build up to it. And you're kind of like, what? When you get to it, and then you start thinking back to the different ways that it builds up to it. So that's kind of like how I like to build dread as well. So it's just fun.
Yeah.
I like when people message me. They're like, "DL, what the hell?" So I love getting I love getting those messages. So much fun,
That's like Hitchcock getting the screams in the theater.
right?
Oh,
Oh my
yeah.
goodness.
We live for that. But I
Oh, of
wanted to go
course.
back to what Regina was saying. I
Yes,
watch a lot of videos of horror games on
yes,
YouTube,
yes. I play a lot of
and she
horror
was talking
games.
about the sound
Yes,
and how that does. Because I know the players, the gamers wear the headphones, so they
yeah, I
hear a
do
lot of
too.
stuff that we don't hear.
Yeah,
And I actually played one of those games. I don't know why I did, but the sounds that they put in those games, the tiny little
yes.
creaks, the
We'll get
whispers, not
yes,
even the scare chords. I mean,
yeah.
those are you expect because
But you're just
you,
hearing stuff like
but you hear all these
surrounding you.
whispers and things around you,
Yes,
and
it
it
builds
really
the
does add to
atmosphere.
this. Yes, it does, most
No,
definitely.
100. Yeah, so I'm a big horror gamer. So I have like all the horror games. If you name one, I probably have it.
Wow. I don't play any of that stuff, but
Oh,
It's
I don't
very
play any. Yeah, I
interesting.
watch them. I'm
oh,
not.
okay.
They
Yeah, I
they
know
and they
better.
build horror. They build fear in you while you're
They
playing
do.
them. So they're
They
very
really do.
creepy. Because then
Okay.
you're playing one, and you're like, I like there are alley that you gotta go across or something. You're like, I really don't want to run across this alley because something might get me,
Yep.
And then of course something does come, you know.
Because that's the whole point.
Yeah, that's the whole point. So the horror games are just a whole other aspect of horror.
Wow.
Like I love it. Just add another layer. Like you get to
So, do
interact
you do
with the
Pierce the
scary.
Fathom? Because that's the one I was watching,
Yes.
and all their games, I love them.
Yes. It's a lot of different horror games out here to try. The new Silent Hill's coming out. I do a lot all the Silent Hill games. They have Silent Hill movies as well, but the video games are very extremely creepy.
Yeah, I can't take
Yeah, they're very bad. They're
that.
very
I can't do it.
twisted. They're very twisted
I
and very
can't do
bad.
it.
All right, so we're gonna go on to our next topic. Actually, no, actually, I want to do one more question in this one because I think I like this particular question. Which horror subgenre speaks to you most and why? So I don't want to skip this question because I want to see what you're going to say. And Dahlia, you can answer first.
I enjoy apocalyptic horror. Like
Oh, okay.
in my first answer or the second answer doesn't matter. Um, the thing of normalcy just going out of the window. So now you have no infrastructure to hang on to. There's no gas, no well, you can't go to Target, you can't go to the 7-Eleven, you cannot do anything. And then
Yeah.
you have this roaming monster that never stops, constantly chasing you. Now I'm a
Mhm.
fan more of the slow zombies. I mean, I'm not mad at 28 days later. I enjoy that one too. But
Right.
I mean, if they're fast, it's almost easier,
True.
I
True.
guess, because you know what to expect. But when they're just walking,
Yeah.
it's
You
it's
don't
very
know.
difficult. Once they get into a big mass, a big crowd, what do you do?
Sure.
So that kind of stuff I like, when everything's just shut down and it's just you and the monster that you have to deal with.
Yeah, okay. I like that. I like that. All right, Regina, how about you?
I think my favorite would be like gothic or gothic romance, but more gothic than romance, but having a little bit of romance in it, like the
Yeah.
atmospheric castles and just all that stuff that,
I like burnt offerings.
oh, I love burn offerings. That kind
Yeah.
of stuff, that classic kind of like a haunted house,
Hmm.
scary
Yes.
castle, but some romance into it, some basement creaking, all of that kind of
Nice.
stuff. I think more than like I don't read a lot of extreme horror, but I might
Yes.
do it just as an experiment. I bought a bunch of extreme horror books at my antique store, and they were like
Yeah.
really rare books signed by the author. Like what's his name? Now I'm trying to remember. Ketchum. What's his first name?
Oh, Jack.
Jack Ketchum.
Jack
Like
Ketchum, yeah.
a lot of that stuff, the more splatterpunk type. And I don't
Yeah.
read a lot of that
Yeah.
because it kind of grosses me out. But I'm like, I'm going to challenge myself to read some of that. But I think I'm more of into like the gothic stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we all got our favorites for sure,
Mm-hmm.
and both of those are great. I love both of those. I think I'm always leaning more cosmic horror. I
Mm.
think that's
Mm.
one of my favorite genres. Where they'll call it, sometimes they'll say Cthulhian horror, but usually it all leans cosmic horror. Anyway, if you don't use the term Cthulhian, or Eldritch, people will throw that in there too. So though Eldritch is different than cosmic, because I think Eldritch is more still grounded in our world, and then it would be in a cosmic setting.
Mm.
And then I think my second one would be psychological, which of course is still leaning cosmic because they can come run hand in hand a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And with sci-fi, because if you can mix all those together, I probably would be like, I'm really into that. I like otherworldly creatures that can't be defeated. I
Mm.
Like
really am
aliens.
into that. Yeah, I really.
Aliens classic.
Right?
I love
Alien's a
aliens. Love
classic, of
it.
course. I'm very intrigued by any scientific based horror. I really
Mm.
like that thing, creatures from other worlds that we don't understand, or just it come in, they take us out. That's why I was really into found footage horror for the films,
Mm.
because like Cloverfield, for instance, because
Oh,
it
don't get me
doesn't
started.
really explain, right? It doesn't explain where the
Mm-mm.
aliens
It's
and what
just
they're going to
there.
do. They're just there. They landed. I mean, we wouldn't know if we were just going by a day and then something landed on the planet and decided to wipe us out. We wouldn't know. We would never find out, because most
That's
likely we're
right.
going to get killed, a lot of us, you know what I mean? So we would never know. So the likelihood of that in horror, when you don't find out, is very believable for horror, because if you end up getting killed, you didn't find out. We don't always find out these answers. So horror is like the aspects of where those things lie. So I think cosmic horror is my favorite, because I want to see something that isn't based in human like aspects where they can beat it.
Mm.
I like to see something that's like well, that's it for us. Yeah, we have no. This thing is too like it's too above us. Like, what we're gonna do? Like, we can't,
Right.
trying to figure out what we're gonna do. I always was interested. Hence why I always liked H.P. Lovecraft,
Mm.
because of those aspects that he would write about. But yeah, that's cosmic horror probably is like my love of subgenre for that. But I'm really leaning to horror romance a lot lately. I do like that too, because
I did.
it's
Yeah,
dark.
I like that too.
Yeah.
I think Alien is just, it's one of my favorite movies. I think it's just
Yes,
the perfect monster movie,
it
Yeah.
is
and so beautiful, like so well done, and just the aesthetics of it and everything. But
very
it's like
much.
it's that relentless
They put a lot of work into
uh,
that.
They sure
that
did.
that
Great
thing that
practical
just wants to
effects.
eat you and that doesn't
Yep. And
care.
that's it. There's no
That's it.
reasoning.
Yeah.
You can't bargain. There's no
No.
reasoning.
Just wants to eat you, and that's
Yeah.
it. It's over.
It's like no
you know.
country for old men in space.
Yeah, that. All right, so our next topic is going to be voices in the dark. Indie horror publishing, personal vision, and reaching the right audience. So the first question for you ladies is, what has indie publishing allowed you to do that traditional might not, in your opinion? So as you have published, what do you believe you were able to do that traditional would otherwise hinder you from doing? And I'll let you take that, Regina, to start.
I think I just anything I want to write, I can write. That is the the best thing about it. If I feel like writing this type of book, like I like the next, I have a couple different projects I'm kind of finishing up editing, but I think the next horror book, I want to explore like the Jersey Devil or kind of get involved in that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, and I'm like, wow, I could just do what I want. I can do
When you
Jersey
want to.
Devil, or I can do something, or when I want to, or not. So whatever moves me, I can just decide to write that. And that is something really awesome. So I say just the
Most
freedom.
definitely.
I agree. And Dahlia, same.
Well, indie publishing has allowed me to collaborate and work with other authors in the genre, horror genre. And basically, well, I've been involved in three horror anthologies. And we were able to pick the theme. I had to do some editing, but that's okay. And we were able to just collect stories that fit the theme, pick the ones that we wanted. It was a little mini committee. And then we actually went through and published the book. We published two of them. And the third one I was just asked to be in, and that was a B horror movie type anthology that I wrote a story for. But I think indie publishing brings a lot of us together and enables us to collaborate very easily on a certain vision that we may have.
I agree with that. Cool. Both of those points, actually. And I think that they tie into each other. The freedom to make those choices, who you work with, who you do not, and to write what you want when you want to. So I think all those things I agree with. And so I'm not going to add anything to that, but I definitely concur 100 on those.
Well, just to let you guys know, and I know DL's been in Bookworms before, but the next one, I haven't announced this yet, but I'll throw it out to you. The theme is will be like cryptid horror, like monsters, Jersey Devil, Bigfoot. So if you are interested in submitting a story, we're looking for stuff, and I like to get more women.
Yeah, you look for more of those. Yeah, that definitely.
We're out here.
I know, but I get so many submissions from men, which are fine. Most of them.
But you're like, where's the women at?
You want diversification,
Yeah, diversification.
And that's absolutely, and that's an interesting thing with women in horror. I do feel like we're very much still a minority.
We are, I believe. Yeah, I believe that. That's why I think I had looked into like trying to do like a podcast for female horror writers, and doing some type of thing for that, so that way you can draw more and find more female horror writers out there, because there's not a lot of us that we know about each other. You know what I mean? We're spread out. We're there. We're just like connecting together and making a full front so people know we're all here. So that's a good point for sure. Yeah, I definitely will be looking into that.
Yeah, I'll send you guys the links when it comes out.
That's awesome. All right, so the second question for this topic is, how do you connect with your horror audience? And I know everybody does things differently. So, Dahlia, how do you connect with your horror audience?
Well, right now I'm in two different horror groups on Facebook. One is for Black women in horror, not exclusively, but that was the founding principle of it. And also a group that it's a little slow now, but I was a part of, called Colors in Darkness, which is a group of horror authors. I'm also in this found footage, not to make films, but just discuss found footage films, which I probably shouldn't be in, because I have now a whole to watch list. It's too long. And I have a Facebook page, but I don't really actively promote my horror, because that's under another pen name, and sometimes it's just too much. But if I see something on my feed, or if I see something in the group, that's how I connect with people like that. It's real simple, real organic, do it through social media.
Cool. And Regina?
I probably just mostly through my YouTube channel, Regina's Haunted Library. So I've been doing, I can't believe it's been like 6 years since I've had that channel going, and I guess slowly growing. And
quite well, I think.
Oh, thanks. Well, the community has been awesome.
Yeah.
The Authortube community, and doing the anthologies, I got to get to know people. So I think it's mostly through that. I do have Instagram. I'm not that great with social. I mean, I hate to be like, I'm not good at social, but I'm really not that good at social media. But like, I don't do TikTok. I started, and I'm like, I don't have the bandwidth. for this. I'm too old. I can't do it. So I think just the more you do it, I think, and you meet more people and kind of
You branch out.
you
Yep.
branch out. Yeah. And I did do and I'm trying to do more conferences. I did StokerCon a couple of years ago, which was really cool. So I got to meet people that way. So, and also through the zine. So
that's pretty. I mean, I think we all have our aspects of how we connect with our audience, and I think all of them are relevant because we all have our way of doing things. And I think that's the good thing about when we do these panels, that people can hear other ways that they may not have thought of to try. I have dibbled and dabbled and tried multiple different places to find my audience since I was unaware of where I should look when I started. So I'm on all the social medias. Ones I mostly frequent currently is like TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, of course. I'm quite dedicated to my YouTube channel, and I do a lot of TikTok. But I think that my newsletter, I try to push that as well. It's slowly building, very slowly building, but I still do mention it. And I think I've gotten a few more people as of late, which I'm very happy whenever I get one person. Yeah, I try to. I know some people say, well, pick a platform. That's the general you'll hear. Pick a platform and stick with that one. And I'm like, yes, I do understand and concur that does help you not spread yourself thin. But I think in my past life I was probably butter because I tend to spread myself thin.
But that's probably good. I'm like with TikTok, that's book talk or whatever.
Yeah, they really go crazy with book talk. They really do over there. I mean, I've not edged into. I have a store on there now because I have enough followers to have a store and all that stuff. And I haven't really sold a lot on there or anything, but I do have a audience that does, watch my stuff and integrate there. And I'm almost at the 1,000 mark, so that way I can do live streams soon, which I think will help a little bit as well there. But I try to find my audience in different places, so that way, like if anything ever happens with one of my social medias, then I'm not completely locked out, and they can find me somewhere else. That was always my thing. I definitely do agree that maybe find yourself 2 social medias that you can manage and do. But to try to make a presence on as many as you're able to, just in case there could be an audience there you are unaware of, then they could find you organically as well as possible. Even if you don't frequent it, at least it's there in case something goes wrong with another one. Hence why your newsletter is also an important one to try to have, just in case something goes wrong with even, let's say, KDP for where you publish your books. You never know.
Yeah, true.
So trying to have some kind of place where your audience can be, I like to gather people from different places. And I think I can get, since I'm a multi-genre author too, though I'm a Mistress of Horror, but I do write different genres. And then that way the different platforms might pull my people who follow, different genres as well. So I tend to try to be where I can. A little bit everywhere, in a cosmic horror type of way. Like, I'm everywhere, child. You can't get rid of me,
That sounds
a very creepy way. All right. With that note, we're going to move on. I think that, and it will be our last topic, actually, for this panel. And this one is shaping the future of fear, which I really love this topic. Innovation, inclusion, and emerging trends in indie horror. And the first question for this particular part is, what are you excited to see or create in indie horror over the next few years? So this could be, what you want to create, or maybe what you're excited for in horror. And Regine, I'll let you go first.
Oh, wow. You mean like in general with other?
Yeah, what you want to see from others, also maybe also what you want to create. You can go either or you can say one or the other.
Well, I think like fresh voices in horror to me is exciting.
Yes.
Seeing even like what younger people think about horror, like what they want to do creatively, what kind of like like in film, horror has always been like an evergreen kind of genre because we have these films making all kinds of money, but it doesn't seem to translate as much into publishing.
True.
Very true.
So I would like to see the horror genre grow in publishing with young younger authors or any age really, but just a diverse group of voices and how they interpret horror, I think would really be cool. So I'm looking forward to that.
Anything you're interested in creating and writing yourself that you may not have tackled as of yet, but you're interested in doing in the future?
I don't. Well, I mean, I've actually started. I got in a little into like fantasy. Like I have a 2 fantasy books on Royal Road, the fantasy, under my pen name, but R. St. Clair. But I feel like I'm going into like a different area. It's not horror, so
Right.
maybe a little fantasy or fantasy horror, like
Yeah.
pushing my own personal comfort zone a bit.
Okay, cool.
But that's not really that exciting. But I think that when you were talking about cosmic horror, like when anyone brings up something that seems cool, I start thinking, oh, I should write a cosmic horror story. Like I'm
You
already
might like
thinking
it.
about,
I
I love reading it. So
Yeah.
I don't know, wherever my fancy takes me, but I do like to explore the genres of, like, challenge myself. Like I know there have been some Western horror
Ooh, yes.
anthologies, and
Don't
I'm
see a
like,
lot of those, so
no.
that's cool.
And I'm like, well, I'm always trying to come up with different themes for the zine.
Yes.
So I'm like,
So
well,
that
maybe
makes
I'll
you think.
do like a Western horror zine or something. So,
That's cool.
yeah.
That'd
We
be
did
cool
the
too.
last one was space, like space
Yes,
horror.
and that's always like space, the sci-fi anyway is like the sister to horror anyway. Like it's always got like it has a taste of horror in sci-fi. It's like you can't do without it, really.
And I think we could use more sci-fi horror.
I agree.
In movies,
I'm always ready for that.
And like a good TV show, even.
Yeah, we don't get a lot of it now. I think for a while there we were, because I remember when Prometheus came out.
Oh, I love Prometheus.
Right? And that whole series leading to the alien stuff. And I was like, yeah, definitely with Predator and stuff, and really interested in those integrative those stories, and finding out like the humans were just made to be food training for the aliens, so that they were just food for the aliens, so that way the predators could hunt the aliens, and we were just their food we were nothing. Like that whole concept was like awesome. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I really love sci-fi horror, so I definitely agree with that. That'd be great if you do that.
I love the Alien franchise. I'll go see every time one of those new movies. I like the last one. People complain about them, but I'm there for everyone.
I feel that
it's definitely not the same vibe as it was, and people have seen so much since then.
They have.
Yeah.
That when something new is trying to put on something old, there's always like, well, it's not 1979. And so you have to but you have to understand this is a different era, different director, different actors.
Yeah.
And you're going to get something different. I enjoyed the movie personally.
Yeah, me too.
I was like, anything alien, I'll watch.
I'll watch and check it out.
I watch Alien. Okay, so I don't
still watch it. I go back and watch the classic. I love the classic.
Exactly.
Can't. And what about you, Dahlia? Again, the question was, what are you excited to see or create in indie horror over the next few years?
Well, I'm excited to see, piggybacking on what Regina said again, that I want to see horror from different perspectives.
Yes.
It doesn't always necessarily have to be, especially with psychological horror, to see more people doing weird, different things in the genre. I'm also planning on writing. I did have a sequel to Loving Among the Dead, and I know zombies are not real big, but I still enjoy it, and I still want to redo the sequel that I did to Loving Among the Dead, because originally it was supposed to be a trilogy, but the publisher went out of business, and I kind of lost a taste for it. But that's what I'm planning on in the future. I also want to write, or in the midst of writing, I guess would be a supernatural horror story where people who were murdered, and there's this afterlife where they're tasked to come back to life, not really life, but life, and to kill people who get away with things in the justice system.
Ooh.
Oh, I'm interested in that right now.
Yeah, me too. Sounds like a good idea.
of people, you get matched up with a partner or it's a group, and then it's a little romance going, of course, because if you're matched up,
Of course, let's
I
go.
cannot resist that part sometimes. And
I'm
they
putting
come
this
back.
on. I'm ready for this to
I
come out. I'm
know.
going to bother you now. Dahlia, where's the book at, Dahlia? You
Well,
told
it's
us about this
actually an
book,
origin
Dahlia.
story of the two stories that I put into the two anthologies.
Oh, okay,
So
cool.
I do have a couple that goes and murders. Well, they're the adjusters. So they make
Oh,
adjustments of things
I
that
like the
were
name, The
broken.
Adjusters. Okay.
So those are the two things that I'm
Okay,
planning. But I
cool.
really like to see different movies like the Tales from the Hood stuff. So I wish people would write more anthologies like that.
I love
Yeah.
Snoop Dogg
the
had that
original
movie
Yeah,
movie.
right?
Bones.
That's a good one.
Bones was great.
Bones
I
was
want to
great, yeah.
see somebody write something like that, and maybe some more like gothic haunted house things, but set
Yeah.
in a modern type
Mindset.
town.
Yeah.
Almost like
Yeah.
a combination of Grave Encounters and
Yeah.
Burnt Offerings in a book. I'd read
Mm.
that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree with that. I like that. Actually, yeah. Oh, that's good. I'm looking forward to that book right now, actually.
me too.
I'm ready for that. But yeah, I definitely, I think myself that I'm always looking just to write something that comes to me. Like I have a serial killer story that I'm writing, and which is obviously out of my zone of just monsters that aren't human monsters.
Mm.
But of course, my stuff has to have a twist. It's called Sprinkles, and he's a cannibal too. So, and he likes
Mm.
sprinkles.
I thought he drove
So,
ice cream truck.
so it's something a little funny, a little bit too. Some people are creepy funny, very
Mm.
deranged funny. So different. I like to try to write some different stuff. Though cosmic horror is where my heart is. So a lot of my stuff leans that way. But I'm always looking to write something that otherwise I may not. I was interested in writing like comedy horror at some point.
Mm.
Um, People always like, "Oh, you're so funny, DL." I'm like, let me see if I can get that in my horror somewhere. Maybe I love watching comedy horror. That's one of my favorite pastimes, looking at like comedy horror. So it's always hilarious. But yeah, so I think that I probably would try to do some comedy horror in the future at some point because I love watching it. So why not try to write one at
Yeah, of
some point? You
course.
know what I mean? So, but yeah, that kind of brings us to the end of our questions. One thing I wanted to bring up is that the current trends for horror books right now and what's doing well in horror. I did hear a few different things, and I wanted to let me see if I can pull it up here just to make sure I got my topics straight on that. I think I heard something. I don't know if you ladies have heard about eco horror where
Eco
they're
horror.
where they're like exploring like I guess like
Like the ruins.
I think they mean like
Oh, okay.
environmental
Okay.
based like eco like that so I think it says so it's reflecting growing environmental concerns. Eco horror has gained prominence in stories often depict natural retellings against human exploitation, as seen in the narrative of featuring forests consuming towns and oceans birthing monstrosity entities. Have you seen a growth in that? Have you read anything that's similar to that? I haven't really noticed, but it is like number 3 on the
Oh,
trending list
Oh,
now,
okay.
well, I
which
know
I
there's
haven't
been
heard.
like plague horror.
Okay.
Like you know,
Yeah,
I just read I've read a couple books in the last few years, whereas it's like
of
COVID
course. I
fears.
think because of that, yeah, I think that probably brought it to light a lot too because of COVID. And if they wrote it, people probably was really going to read it because they were
Mhm.
living in a
Yeah.
similar setting. So I think that's probably why that was touched on. Oh, and another one, psychological horror is still sitting at number 1 right now,
Oh wow.
which is like, oh, I didn't realize it. But psychological horror is always a favorite because I think a lot of times it grounds us. It
Mhm.
gives that reality set, which a lot of people do like the type of horror that they can connect to. I've
Hmm.
heard
Right.
that a lot, especially people who lean away from monster horror. They lean into more human aspects of something horrific that they can connect to, you know.
Mhm.
Then I heard folk horror, which I was like, I wasn't sure where
Okay.
that falls. You know what I mean? And I think that's to do with like ancient myths and legends. So I
Hmm.
think that's like doing decent right now. And
Okay.
I think haunted houses is back, and the
Yeah.
classics apparently classic genre is doing well as well. So I'm like, I'm actually glad just to hear that horror is doing well in general.
Me too.
Um, it's good for us horror indie authors,
I know,
obviously.
right?
right? So I'm not going to frown upon that. So we're going to wrap up here for this panel, and I want to thank Adalia D. Winters and Regina St. Clair for joining me on this Anatomy of Fear. There's so much in the Anatomy of Fear that we could go over. We can talk for days, believe it.
That is true.
But I'm going to give each one of you the floor once again to let our audience know where they can find you, what you have coming up, if you have anything. Do be aware that this is pre-recorded, so if you have something that's coming up around when this will air, which is in June, then if something is happening around that time or before, you definitely want to let people know that so that they'll be ready to grab it up. So I'll let you take the floor first, Dahlia, on that, and let everyone know where they can find you, and also if you have anything coming to us.
Well, you can find me on Facebook under Dahlia D. Winters. If you want to follow my specifically horror page, that would be Zame Hill, which is basically just a Facebook page. Probably by June, hopefully, fingers crossed, I don't have a title yet for the story, but my little Supernatural Avengers Adjusters story should be coming out then. But until then, I'm on Facebook. I post a whole bunch of different stuff, and I usually post what I'm doing there on my profile.
Cool.
Thank you. And Regina.
Well, I think my general hub would be my YouTube channel, Regina's Haunted Library. I have all my links under my whatever videos up. And by June, I'm hoping the new Bookworms Horror Zine will be out. So that's probably the next thing that I'm getting out. So that's also listed on my YouTube channel. So that's kind of my hub where you find me. But on Amazon, you can find my books under R. St. Clair and Goodreads. And I do have a Facebook page that I need to update, but yeah. And I'm on Instagram too.
Awesome. You can find all of the links for our panelists in the description box, of course. And make sure you connect with them. If they have a newsletter, follow it. If you are not subscribed to their YouTube channel, please do so and follow them on all their socials and check out their books because I've read quite many of their works and it is definitely worth a purchase. And if you don't know me, I am author D.L. Tillery, the Mistress of Horror. And you can find me on all the social medias, TikTok, Twitter X, Facebook, all the ones that you can name, Threads. They pop a new one up. I'm probably there. I'm just telling you. And you can find all my books, including Cagliostro, which is my newest dark fantasy romance. It's got a little bit of something for everyone in that story, I would say. So check it out. It is available in ebook, paperback, audiobook, and physical hardback, and probably every kind of which way you can read a book. It's available. So do check it out. All the links are below. And we will see you again soon. And as I always like to say before I end any of my shows, stay scared. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks for having me.
Bye. All right, everyone, that is the panel. I hope you enjoyed that. I enjoyed having it and having Regina and Dahlia D. Winters on. It was great fun, as always, talking about scaring others. There are some questions in the chat that I will go through and answer as many as I can before we need to send you off to the next panel or presentation or workshop. Plus, we have the Saturday night after party that I hope you join us for. Let me go through real quick just to try to get. Leon had a few that I would like to try to grab. Leon said, I've had many sleepless nights re-horror as Utah. Do you think your past exposure to horror movies has embedded a deep-seated fear, making you hesitate to explore genres in writing even now? Personally, no. I think that it's someone who could have been interested in horror before, as far as movies, and they don't seem to be leaning into it now. It could have been a trend for them. It could have just been their current interest at the time, and they may not want to be scared anymore. Personally, I love the watching things that's scare me. I mean, in most generality, there's not the movies or something like that isn't going to scare us per se. 100, it makes us uncomfortable at the minimum. And I had a discussion with some other horror writers in the past about the therapy based, the psychological based instances of why we like the fear, the horror, why we drawn to it, why we want to watch it. And a lot of times it's because in our daily lives, we have so much going on, some of us very bad things, that it can help us cope with those things by watching someone else in the film, let's say, go through those horrific incidents, and can help us in a kind of therapeutic type of way to watch someone else have to go through something very terrible, bad as that may sound in some cases. But in all honesty, that could be a draw of thinking about the psychological and reality of why we are drawn to horror. And then no, there was more. Okay, and Leon also said iPad. I think that's probably the second version of that. Hesitate to explore genre writing. I would not. I love writing and scaring people. 100. So all right, and Leon had another one. I've heard gamekeeping a lot this far. Do indie authors have advantages in writing, leveraging their creative freedom to subvert trendy horror tropes and craft unique, unsettling, scary stories? I think, as we talked about in the panel, that we have the flexibility to do what we want, how we want, without the traditional setting, possibly silencing us in some kind of way. I've recently read some of Richard Lehman's books, and I didn't care for the first one, Bite, only because I'm more into monster horror and it actually being a monster and focusing on the monster aspects. But that's a reading choice. But then I moved on to his second book, which I'm doing a reading-thon. Unfortunately, I had a extended hospital stay, so I couldn't finish the readathon the way I wanted to. But the second book that I was reading is a bit too close to home for me. So that's probably one of the first times that I had a book where I was like, okay, the aspects of things that he's writing about in this book, I'm not going to probably be able to make it through it without being affected to some degree. Since in this particular book, the beast that is a human, because there is an actual beast in the story, he was a PDF and he was hurting a 10-year-old girl. And it hits too close to home for me because I have almost a 10-year-old daughter minus 1 year. And I don't think reading it as it would go into somewhat detail that I'd be able to stomach it. Not to mention, I can't tend to generally stomach hurting of children because it's a very sensitive subject for me. Personally, I have written children get hurt in some of my stories, but it was by a actual monster, not a human monster. Vampires, werewolves, things like that. I don't really skim, and no one's safe in my horror. But when it's a human hurting another human and a child, I'm not really okay with it. Personally, some people can read through it. I imagine I could read it, but I'm not sure that I would want to. So that one kind of took the precedence over. Like, being that he was traditionally published, and it's back in the day, so they, it depends on who you knew and things like that. But I'm not sure that some companies would take it because of the subject matter. So those type of instances, if you are indie, you could write whatever you want, albeit if you get frowns about it, because he has some choice words about him from people who read. So that could be a thing. And I'm going to speed up a little bit here because I don't want to go over too much. Aphrodite, I have always been so curious as to why so many people find horror funny. I can't sleep for years, but others are giggling. That's because we enjoy scaring people. Also, people who read, sometimes we find some very creepy and off the wall things funny because our humor, way our mind works around horror is kind of a weird, very weird personal thing. And I know I saw another cue. Aphrodite being funny. How huge are your therapy bills? Because damn. I haven't had any therapy for horror because it kind of keeps my mind at peace, to be honest with you. Leon said, could each of you describe, unfortunately we were pre-recorded, Leon, but I can give my own answer on this. Could you describe your process? How can popular stories as book structures be utilized to amplify the horror elements in a narrative? And what are some effective ways to punch up the scares? As far as my process, if you download Ladrega, you will get my process pretty good. Also, I have a mini guide of how to outline a short horror story, which will give you an idea since I'm pressed for time to go through my process. But my whole thing when I talked about in the panel is how I'd like to scare. I do layered Easter eggs. I like to creep up on you. Everybody's different about how they write their horror, and that's generally how I do. And then how to effectively ways to punch up the scares. I think the best way is you could do shock factor, but I prefer to ease into the scary so you don't see it coming. And then once it has you, there's no escaping. So really think about scary as when you're writing it as a way to creep up on the reader. Leaving little things leading up to. That's my personal flavor and choice of scaring others. I'm just going to scroll real quick and make sure there's none. That's too much. Leon also said, psychological horror invokes fear and uneasiness in me. Does horror writing demand a more emotional, mental precision of calculated approach to crafting scenes and world building to maximize fear and tension? Psychological horror that I mentioned, people tend to like it because it can be grounded in reality. It doesn't seem like it, but then it leads to reality. It could trick you. That's why a lot of people like the psychological effects of it because it's a bit of a twist and turn to it. As far as a world building to maximize fear and tension, works great, of course. The tension and build of that, I'm a very character-driven writer, and my plot and story comes to life within the character's life. So I tend to build fear slowly because to me, that's the best way the fear works, is not to grab them. I don't really do big, big shock, jump scares. I'm not really a jump scare type. But I like to creep up on you because that's the best way to get you, because once I've got you, it's too late to do anything about it. But I'm going to do one more question if there was more, and then I'm going to have to let go. And Leon said, is escape room still a thing? Yes, it is, Leon. Those seem prime for picking, or did Saw series max out the subgenre? I would say no. Especially in video games, they're still prominent, and they definitely can be. There's actually a film coming out, Japanese-based, made, that's going 100 into the escape room setting. If you look it up on YouTube, you'll see the trailer for it, but I'm really curious to see how they're going to play that one out, to be honest. So. And then DL said, I find horror funny. We know you do, DL. So thanks, everyone, for being here for this panel, and I really appreciate you. Again, I want to thank SD, Houston, Kaufman, and Devin for putting everything together and working their butts off. Thank you to all the volunteers, moderators, and everyone who's putting all the time in for this amazing AWC 2025 as they have for the previous years. So I will see you at the after party over on SD Houston's channel. I believe that's where it is, but the link is in the description. Again, don't forget to fill out the form, which is also in the description, so that way you can get the check for this so you could possibly enter to win something awesome. All right, and I will see you all there. And once again, be sure to stay scared. Good night.